Never thought I'd be the guy who'd find inspiration in a junkyard, but here I am, sitting in a roadside motel with my grandpa's weird metal sculpture staring back at me from the dresser. Life's funny that way, I guess. It all started 3 days ago when I got the call about Grandpa Jack passing. I was in the middle of my studio art class at Iowa City when Mom's name flashed on my phone. Immediately knew something was up. She never calls during class hours. "Alex, honey, it's Grandpa Jack. He's gone." Her voice cracked in that way that told me she was trying hard not to lose it completely. I hadn't seen Grandpa in almost a year, busy with college and all. Now he was gone, and all I had were memories of him teaching me how to hold a welding torch when I was 12, showing me how the metal glowed like liquid sunshine. The drive back to Huntington took 4 hours. The whole way, my mind kept drifting to Grandpa Jack's yard, that wild collection of twisted metal sculptures that made the neighbors whisper. Most people in town called him the Metal Wizard, and kids would dare each other to run across his property. What they didn't understand was his art. Grandpa Jack wasn't just some crazy old man welding junk together. Before retirement, he'd been one of the most skilled welders in the county, tough as nails and twice as sharp. When he hung up his professional torch, he picked up an artistic one. The family gathering at the old farmhouse was exactly what I expected. Awkward silences punctuated by even more awkward conversations about what to do with Grandpa's mess. That's what Uncle Bill called it anyway. Could have scrapped all that metal and at least made something useful out of it, he muttered while nursing his third beer on the porch. Mom wasn't much better. She stood at the kitchen window, looking out the yard full of abstract shapes catching the afternoon sun. Your grandfather just couldn't face reality. All those metal things were just his escape. Dad was the worst, though. Dad, Dan Harper, town mechanic and dedicated realist, paced around the living room like Grandpa's artwork was personally offending him. I can handle having oddballs in the family, but artists? He practically spat the word. It's all nonsense, Alex. Pure nonsense. While everyone was busy planning how to erase Grandpa's legacy, I slipped out to his workshop. The old barn smelled like metal dust and WD-40, Grandpa's cologne, as he used to joke. The shelves were lined with his pieces. Some looked like humans twisted into impossible positions. Others were abstract, emotions captured in rusted chains and bicycle frames. Each one had a presence, like they were breathing. That's when I found it. A sketchbook with burn marks along the edges from welding sparks. Inside were his designs, detailed drawings of human forms intertwined with mechanical parts. Emotions trapped in iron. Each page hit me harder than the last. These weren't random junk piles. They were carefully planned expressions. I remembered being 10, Grandpa guiding my hands as we worked on a small sculpture together. When words fail you, Alex, shape will speak. Form is the language of the soul. I started taking pictures of the sculptures with my phone, not thinking much of it. I uploaded 3 of them to eBay. Just curious what would happen, you know? I gave them fancy names: Post-Industrial Hug, Rust Bloom, and Hollow Memory. The next morning, I checked my phone expecting something, but there was nothing. Not a single bid. Not even a view on the listings. Turns out the world wasn't exactly clamoring for rusty metal art from an unknown creator in rural Iowa. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that these pieces deserved to be seen. I scrolled to the photos again, each one capturing something raw and honest that Grandpa had poured into his work. When I showed Dad the photos, I thought he might finally see what I saw in them. Instead, his face turned that dangerous shade of red. You're not turning your grandfather's junk into some kind of business. Do you want the whole town thinking we're all nuts? Delete that internet garbage right now, or you can just leave. He grabbed the sketchbook from my hands and threw it to the floor. Pages scattered everywhere. Grandpa's vision splayed across the wooden boards. Without a word, I gathered the pages. Then I went to the shelf and took one piece. A small figure made of keys and copper wire that looked like a person with a broken heart. I left with Grandpa's sculpture rattling in the trunk of my beat-up Corolla. No goodbyes, just the sound of tires on gravel and the setting sun in my rear-view mirror. Now I'm here in this cheap motel that smells like plastic and vending machine coffee. My laptop screen glows in the darkroom. The eBay listings sit at 0 bids, 0 views. But I'm not giving up. This isn't scrap metal. This is Grandpa Jack's voice. And somehow, I'm going to make sure the world hears it. The morning after my dramatic exit, reality hit harder than my alarm. I had exactly $237 in my bank account, a trunk full of metal sculptures, and no clue what to do next. Welcome to adulthood, right? Within a week, I'd found the cheapest apartment in town, a studio above a laundromat with a ceiling that leaked whenever someone took a shower upstairs. The rent was still highway robbery at $675 a month, but at least they didn't ask questions about the weird metal sculptures I hauled in at midnight. Finding work wasn't as hard as I expected. Turns out, Domino's is always hiring delivery drivers. The manager barely glanced at my application before asking when I could start. The next day, I was sporting a polyester polo and delivering pepperonis to drunk college students. My new life fell into a rhythm. Deliver pizzas from 4 p.m. to midnight, crash on my $50 Facebook Marketplace futon, and spend mornings photographing Grandpa Jack's art in the best light my apartment's single window could offer. Between deliveries, I started posting on TikTok, just goofing around at first, complaining about customers who don't tip, showing off my leaky ceiling with plastic containers catching the drips like some depressing indoor rainforest. Pizza's keeping me from bankruptcy. I joked in one video, holding up my Domino's hat like a trophy, and Grandpa's junk is saving me from boredom. The camera panned to a metal sculpture sitting on my makeshift coffee table, an old milk crate I'd found behind a laundromat. One night, after a particularly brutal shift where some frat guys complained their pizza wasn't lit enough, whatever that means, I filmed myself dramatically holding up one of Grandpa's smaller pieces, a scrap metal canvas with swirls of copper wire and red-painted metal forming something like a vortex. "This is me after getting stiffed on tips all night," I said to the camera, mimicking an art gallery curator. I call it Delivery Boy's Descent into Madness. Starting bid, $1 million, or a functioning shower that doesn't leak. I posted it and fell asleep without thinking twice. The next morning, my phone was blowing up with notifications. The video had 50,000 views overnight and climbing fast. Comments were flooding in, but one stood out from the rest. "Dude, is that a lost Jackson Pollock or something? That's legit art." By lunchtime, the count hit 200,000. By dinner, 500,000. People weren't just laughing at my jokes. They were genuinely asking about the art. "Where can we see more?" "Do you sell these?" "That's museum worthy, no cap." I started following up with short videos showcasing individual pieces, explaining how my grandfather had been creating these for decades, while everyone thought he was just a crazy old man with too much scrap metal. He was a professional welder who turned to art after retirement. I explained in one clip. The neighbors called him the Metal Wizard, and not in a nice way. The follower count kept climbing, 10K, then 50K, then 100K. I started getting DMs from small galleries asking if I consider showing the collection. It was surreal. 2 weeks ago, I was a college dropout sleeping in a motel, and now people wanted to feature my grandfather's art. Then came the message that changed everything. "Hello, Alex. I'm Thomas Bloomberg from PBS's Antiques Roadshow. A colleague showed me your TikTok. I'd be interested in examining the red spiral piece. This is not a joke or scam. Please call my office." Yeah, right. Like a famous TV art critic would slide into my DMs. I almost deleted it, but curiosity got the better of me. I Googled Thomas Bloomberg and found his official contact info matched the message. What did I have to lose? $15 for shipping, maybe. I carefully packaged a red spiral piece, Russ Bloom, and sent it off to the New York address Bloomberg provided. Then I went back to delivering pizzas. Try not to get my hopes up. A week later, my phone rang during my lunch break. Unknown number from New York. "Is this Alex Harper?" A cultured voice asked when I answered. "Yeah, that's me. This is Thomas Bloomberg. I've been examining your grandfather's piece, and I have to say, I'm astounded. Your grandfather was hiding extraordinary talent in that workshop of his." My mouth went dry. "You're serious?" "Very serious. This isn't just interesting folk art, Alex. Your grandfather was working with sophisticated artistic concepts, creating commentary on industrialization and humanity's relationship with manufacturing. Did he have formal training? No, he was just a welder who retired and started making stuff. That's what makes it even more remarkable. Raw, untrained genius. Do you have more pieces? I looked around my tiny apartment at the dozen sculptures I'd managed to rescue. Yeah, I've got more. I'd like to purchase Russ Bloom from my personal collection. Would $5,000 be acceptable? I nearly dropped the phone. $5,000 for one piece? I'm sending a check today. And Alex, don't sell anything else until we talk again. I have connections at several galleries that would be very interested in mounting an exhibition. After we hung up, I sat on my futon with shaking hands. A check for $5,000 was heading my way. More money than I had made in 2 months of pizza delivery. Was this really happening? Or was it just another false start, another glimpse of possibility before reality crashed and again? I stared at Grandpa Jack's metalwork gleaming in the afternoon light. Something was shifting, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. Bloomberg didn't just buy Russ Bloom. He turned Grandpa Jack into an overnight sensation. 3 weeks after our phone call, the New Yorker published this article, Jack Harper, America's Undiscovered Artistic Treasure. The subheading called Grandpa's work a raw, untutored genius bridging industrial craftsmanship and fine art. I read it 7 times on my lunch break, nearly spilling pizza sauce on my phone. This was my grandfather they were talking about, the same guy the town had dismissed as that weird old man with his junk pile. The TikTok algorithm went absolutely nuts. My follower count exploded from 100K to 500K in 2 days. The hashtag Grandpa's Art started trending, with people sharing their own relatives' overlooked creative projects. None quite matched Grandpa Jack's welded masterpieces, but the sentiment hit home for a lot of folks. By the end of the week, Bloomberg had arranged my first gallery showing in Manhattan. I quit Domino's with 0 regrets, packed up my few belongings and Grandpa's remaining sculptures, and headed east with nothing but a Google Maps route and a stomach full of butterflies. Suddenly, I was fielding calls from art collectors whose names I only knew from museum placards. The prices they offered made me dizzy. $25,000 for a hollow memory, $40,000 for the untitled piece I found tucked behind Grandpa's workbench. Then came the call from Drew Barrymore's art buyer. She'd seen the New Yorker piece and wanted 3 pieces for her collection. Her offer, $175,000. For scrap metal my family had wanted to throw away. The night before my first major client meeting, I panicked realizing I had nothing appropriate to wear. My wardrobe consisted entirely of T-shirts with pizza stains and jeans with holes that weren't the fashionable kind. I wandered around Macy's like an alien, fingering price tags that made me wince despite my new bank balance. The salesperson must have sensed my discomfort, approaching with a sympathetic smile. First big meeting? I nodded, feeling about 12 years old. The next morning, wearing a navy suit that cost more than my first car, I sat in CNN's green room checking my reflection obsessively. The producer had prepped me with likely questions, but my mind went blank every time I tried to rehearse answers. How did I go from delivering pepperoni pizzas to being interviewed on national television in less than 3 months? The segment was a blur, lights too bright, questions coming too fast, my voice sounding strange in my ears. But somehow I got through it without humiliating myself or Grandpa's legacy. 6 months later, I stood in the center of Forgotten Frames, my own gallery in a renovated warehouse space in Brooklyn. The opening night crowd buzzed around exhibits featuring not just Grandpa Jack's work, but pieces from 5 other overlooked artists I discovered through the hashtag Grandpa's Art movement. A central wall displayed my grandfather's sketchbook pages, enlarged and framed. In the most prominent spot hung Heart of Iron, that small figure made of keys and copper wire I'd taken the night I left home. The price tag read, "Not for sale." 20% of all sales went to funding art programs in VA hospitals and rural community centers. Grandpa Jack had been a Navy man before becoming a welder, and I knew he'd approve of veterans finding healing through creativity. The small-town programs were my own addition, Places like Huntington needed art too. The New York art scene embraced me as some kind of folk hero discoverer of hidden talents. Bloomberg became something of a mentor, though I suspected he enjoyed the reflected fame of having discovered me as much as he appreciated Grandpa's art. My bank account had more digits than I knew what to do with. I rented a decent apartment in Brooklyn, but otherwise kept my lifestyle simple. Most of the money went back into the foundation, or hunting down more forgotten artists whose work deserved recognition. Then came the social media notifications I'd been half expecting, half dreading. Uncle Mark posting throwback photos. Always knew my nephew Alex had a special eye for talent. Hashtag proud uncle, hashtag art in our blood. Mom's Facebook update featured a photo of her standing next to one of Grandpa's smaller pieces she'd apparently kept. So proud of our family's artistic heritage being recognized by the world. Hashtag proud mom. Even Dad, who didn't do social media, had apparently told a local newspaper. Alex comes from a long line of creative thinkers. We always encouraged his connection with his grandfather's artistic side. I ignored all of it. 3 times I drafted angry responses, and 3 times I deleted them. What was the point? Then the letter arrived. Plain white envelope with my parents' return address in the corner. Inside, a handwritten note asking if I'd meet them when they came to New York next month. I stood in my kitchen, staring at those few lines of blue ink on crisp stationery. After everything, the screaming, the ultimatum, throwing Grandpa's designs on the floor. Now they wanted to reconnect? Was it because they genuinely missed me? Or because their son was suddenly worth talking about at church socials and neighborhood barbecues? I couldn't tell which would be worse. If they actually believed their own revisionist history about always supporting me, or they were just transparent opportunists hoping to cash in on my success. Either way, I needed to decide whether to open that door again or keep it firmly shut. Normal wasn't working for me. I replied, or for Grandpa. Uncle Mark, sensing tension, asked about the free drinks with forced cheerfulness. Throughout the evening, I caught glimpses of them wandering the gallery, Dad explaining pieces to strangers like he'd been Grandpa's biggest supporter, Mom smiling for photos beside sculptures she once called eyesores, Uncle Mark networking with art dealers, slipping them his business card. After they left, I retreated to the small office behind the gallery, where I'd been cataloging the last of Grandpa's works. My assistant had organized everything into label boxes: early works, mid-career, final pieces, and personal effects. I opened the personal effects box, hoping the familiar smell of metal and oil would calm my nerves. Inside were Grandpa's welding gloves, some sketchbooks I hadn't looked through yet, and a small metal box I hadn't noticed before. The box was crafted from copper and iron, with "for Alex" etched into the lid. Inside was a folded piece of paper, a letter written in Grandpa's messy handwriting. Dear Alex, if you're reading this, I probably move on to whatever comes next. Maybe you've discovered by now that my junk isn't just scraps welded together. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, hands shaking as I read. Your father never understood why I chose to create instead of just fixing things. He sees value in function, not expression. Don't blame him for that. It's how he was raised. But you, Alex, you see beyond function to meaning. That's rare. The letter continued, filled with memories of our time together in his workshop and observations about life that made me laugh through tears. The final paragraph punched me in the gut. Remember this. Paint your own life, not the picture others want. The family canvas is already crowded with expectations. Make yours vibrant with authenticity instead. I read those lines over and over. Paint your own life, not the picture others want. That night, sitting on my apartment floor with Grandpa's letter beside me, I opened TikTok Live for the first time in weeks. No fancy lighting, no prepared speech. Hey everyone, I want to tell you the real story behind these sculptures. For an hour, I talked about Grandpa Jack being ridiculed for his art, about my father throwing the sketchbook on the floor, about sleeping in a motel and delivering pizzas, about being disowned for believing in something beautiful. Viewers poured in 10,000, then 50,000, then over 100,000. The comments flew by so fast I could barely read them. Hashtag Alex versus family started trending immediately. People shared their own stories of family rejection, of finding their own path, of choosing art over expectations. A popular culture blogger with millions of followers reposted a clip asking, should Alex forgive family members who only support him now that he's successful? The answers flooded in from both sides. Throughout it all, I kept thinking about Grandpa's words. Paint your own life, not what others want. I looked across the gallery at Grandpa's centerpiece sculpture, human figures breaking free from industrial chains. Beyond it hung a photo of my parents from tonight, smiling beside artwork they once wanted to throw away. Forgiveness felt simultaneously like strength and weakness, like wisdom and naivety, like healing and self-harm. I had no answer yet, only the weight of question. 3 weeks after the gallery opening, I found myself driving down the familiar stretch of highway toward Huntington. The rental car felt foreign under my hands, too smooth, too quiet compared to my old Corolla. Like me, it didn't quite belong here anymore. I'd suggested meeting at the Bluebird Diner, just outside of town. Not the fanciest place, but it held memories. Grandpa Jack used to take me there for apple pie after we'd spend hours in his workshop. He'd wipe metal dust from his hands with a bandana before cutting into the flaky crust, telling me stories about his Navy days between bites. They were already seated when I arrived. Mom, Dad, and Uncle Mark squeezed into a booth by the window, the same booth where Grandpa and I had sat countless times. They looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than I remembered. Dad stood awkwardly when he saw me, extending his hand like we were business associates. I shook it briefly before sliding into the seat across from them. "You look good, Alex," Mom said, her eyes darting over my new haircut and clothes. "New York must be treating you well." The waitress recognized me, doing a double take before taking our orders. "Weren't you just on that morning show, talking about those metal sculptures?" I nodded, feeling my parents stiffen across the table. "That's our boy," Dad said with forced pride after she left. Always knew he had something special in him. I took a deep breath, remembering why I'd come. Not for hollow praise or pretend reconciliation. "Let's not do this," I said, cutting him off. I didn't come back for fake compliments or to pretend the past didn't happen. Dad's face reddened, but he stayed silent. "I'm not here to give you back your place in my life," I continued, softer now. "But I am offering you a chance to understand who Grandpa Jack really was. Who I am. That's all I can offer right now." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Uncle Mark stared at his coffee. "We were wrong," Dad finally said, the words seemingly dragged from him. "About Jack's art. About you." Uncle Mark cleared his throat. Maybe I went too far with the whole scrap metal thing. It wasn't full apology, but it was something, an acknowledgement that couldn't have been easy for them. "Grandpa knew you wouldn't understand," I said. "He wrote about it in his letter to me. He didn't blame you, Dad. He said you were raised to value function over expression." Dad's eyes widened slightly. "He said that?" I nodded. "He understood you better than you understood him." The apple pie arrived, steam rising from the perfect golden crust. We all stared at it, remembering the man who should have been sitting with us. "Tell us about him," Mom said quietly. "The part we missed." So I did. I told them about Grandpa's philosophy of finding beauty in broken things, about how each sculpture represented something he couldn't express in words, about how his hands, calloused from years of labor, could create something so delicate from materials so harsh. We reached a fragile understanding that day. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. They would respect Grandpa Jack's legacy, and I would allow them glimpses into my life. Holiday calls, occasional visits, a relationship built on honesty rather than obligation. Back in New York, I expanded Forgotten Frames to include a mentorship program for young artists from small towns like Huntington. Every summer, we brought 10 kids to the city for workshops and gallery tours. Every fall, I returned to Iowa to speak at schools about finding your voice through art. The Harper Foundation for Arts Education now funds programs in 30 schools across Iowa. We provide materials, instruction, and most importantly, encouragement for kids whose families might not see the value in creative expression. Grandpa Jack's work continues to grow in popularity and value. The Smithsonian recently requested Industrial Echo for a special exhibition on self-taught American artists. Dad attended the opening ceremony, standing awkwardly in his best suit, but genuinely trying to understand what people saw in his father's work. My apartment overlooks the Hudson River now, but it's hard as a small home office where Russ Bloom, that swirling red piece that started it all, hangs above my desk. On difficult days, when the art world's politics and pressures threaten to overwhelm me, I look at it and find my center again. Sometimes I think about that night in the motel, heartbroken and alone, staring at the same sculpture and wondering if anyone would ever see what I saw in it. How different my life is now. How many people Grandpa's art has touched. Last week, I received a package from Dad. Grandpa's old welding gloves, cleaned and carefully preserved. The note simply read, "These belong with you. I'm sorry it took me so long to see. It's not perfect. We're not a Hallmark movie family now. But there's truth between us, and that's worth more than comfortable lies." I stand in my office, morning light catching the copper swirls of Russ Bloom, casting warm reflections across the walls. Grandpa's gloves rest on the shelf below it. I smile, thinking of all he taught me, not just about welding and art, but about life and authenticity. He showed me that true family isn't always defined by blood or last names. Sometimes real family are the people who see your value when you can't see it yourself. The ones who recognize your voice from the world, and even you might dismiss it as noise. That a legacy worth preserving, in metal and in memory.